everyone. My name is Elijah David, minister of the 12th Hour Apostolic Sabbatarian Congregation runs out the 12th hour in Little Hill, Texas. Today is August 13, 2013, or it is the 8th day of Elul, 2017. We're going to start our first service today with a song entitled, Who at My Door is Standing? Who at my door is standing, patiently drawing near, and just within me blinding, whose is the voice I hear. Sweetly the tones are falling, open the door for me. If thou wilt heed my calling, I will abide with thee. All through the dark hours dreary, our King again is He. Yahshua, thou not be praying so long for me. Sweetly the tongues are falling, open the door for me. If thou wilt heed my calling, I will abide with thee. Door of my heart, I hasten, even I open wide. Though here rebuke and chasten, He shall with me abide. Sweetly the tones are falling, open the door for me. If thou wilt heed my calling, I will abide with thee. Hello everyone. Once again, this is Elijah David. We're going to continue our series now with David's everlasting kingdom of heaven here on this earth. We're on part 5. So we're going to take from my book, and we're going to be using the chart. As you see here to my right, we're going to pull up this here parabolic 24-hour time clock. We're still in the process of doing a little revision on this time clock. It was written back in the 30s, or drawn back in the 30s by the B.T. Hodder. And so he had it Mount Zion at the 11th hour. Well, as you can see, there's 12 hours on the clock, starting with 1 here, and ending with 12 right here. You still have 1 day of daylight. When Yahshua says in John 11:9, are there not 12 hours in the day? Well, he literally meant that. There's 12 full hours in the day, not 11. But Yahweh kept his hand on that number 11 for the seventh-day Adventists. Adventists could only count to 9, and rightly so. They were the 9th hour call laborers. But they didn't know how to apply the next hour, which was the 10th hour. So when B.T. Hodder came along in 1930 as a daughter of Zion, of the Adventist Church, as a first branch from the Adventist Church, off the Adventist Church, he came with a new life. He said, well, Adventists were called the 9th hour, and he made mention of the 10th hour, but then he saw that in the parable of Matthew 20, verse 6, where it says he went out about the 11th hour. So B.T. Hodder figured that when he came on the scene in 1930 with a new movement, with a new message for the Adventists, and he had just come out of the Adventist Church, So when he saw the parable of Matthew 20 read 9th hour and 11th hour and 6th hour and 3rd hour and 1st hour, early morning, well, he just put two and two together. He said, well, the Adventist for the 4th call at the 9th hour, then the 4th group. I'm the 5th group called at the 11th hour. So he put the 11th hour beginning in 1930. Only thing is, prophecy, as it has unfolded to us today here in the 12th hour, we understand that the 11th hour began in 1970, and rightfully so, because that's the hour that I was called out of the 10th hour in 1970. Right at the end of the 10th hour, I was called to come and work in the vineyard at the 11th hour. Okay. So now, you got the 11th hour, and then you got the 12th hour, and then sundown. So at the beginning of the 11th hour, then you had 2 more hours to sundown. The Holy says the 11th hour was the last hour, and that was the last hour before sundown. Well, and he taught that during the judgment of the dead period, and the judgment of the dead period reached all the way up to the 12th hour, at the beginning of the 12th hour, 2010. So now, having we've reviewed that little bit of information, we're going to start now with continuation of my compilation of that I put together since about the last 7 or 8 years, dealing with the page 21, and so in other words, the name of my book is actually David's Everlasting Kingdom of the Heaven. It says on page 21, we're going to quote B.T. Hart and show his commentary on the wheat and the barley, each for a penny. And he says that in the study of the 7 seals, or with the future reservation for the explanation of the following scripture. And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 beasts say, a measure of the wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of the barley for a penny, of Revelation 6:6. Again, a return unto the reader's attention, for the fact that the voice came from the throne. You see, chapter 5 and verse 11. For the great judge fixes the prices of the cereal. Now, we're going to give you a treat here one day. We're going to, as soon as I get through this series on this, we're going to bring you a series on the pre-11th hour extra by the B.T. Hart. And it's going to be dealing with 4 thrones, 2 permanent thrones. Yahweh and his son Yahshua has a permanent throne. Yahweh the Father has a permanent throne, and then Yahweh the Father has a traveling throne, and the Son Yahshua has a traveling throne as well. This is all pointed out in the book of Ezekiel. So when we get through with this, we're going to teach you about these 4 thrones, and when they come to this earth in these last days, the traveling thrones, that is, the permanent thrones don't come to this earth. They stay in the side of the north. But those traveling thrones are the thrones of judgment for this earth. Okay. So he says, and I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 beasts saying, a measure of wheat for a penny. Now remember, penny is a symbol of your wage, your day's wage for Israel. It works in the vineyard, and it represents eternal life. So if you work every day faithfully and you get your penny a day recorded to your credit, then you are adding credit to eternal life. And every time you get another penny, and every time you add those pennies to each other, it means that you're building upon the experience of perfecting your soul, your life in this world, so that when it's all over with, you finish your labor in the vineyard, you got your full measure of pay, which is a penny a day for every day she works in the vineyard. Then when that's over with, the sun goes down, you have eternal life waiting for you to enter into. So he says that this, it's in 3 measures of the body for a penny. That's found in Revelation 6:6. 1 measure of the wheat for a penny. 3 measures of the body for a penny. Now, as I was saying, the measure of wheat represents a symbol of the 144,000. Now, the measure of the body represents the wave sheep offering. Now, the house of David, tribe of Judah, is going to represent the tribe that is going to represent the body, wave sheep offering. House of David is not a part of the 144,000 as far as being one of the numbers of it. House of David is the headquarters where the throne of Yahshua's throne is at. And that's where he comes to set up this throne here in the house of David, tribe of Judah, lawgiver. Because he is a lawgiver, according to Genesis 49:10. And so therefore he comes and sets up the everlasting kingdom of David, takes charge of it, and brings forth a wave sheep offering represented by the body. Okay, now it says, now I heard in the midst of the 4 beasts a measure of the wheat for a penny. 1 measure of wheat for a penny, but 3 measures of the body for a penny. Alright, folks. VTL's going to do some explanation of this, so pay close attention. This word's going over and over and over again until you get it understood in your mind. Again, return the reader's attention to the fact that the voice came from the throne. And that comes from the throne is where Yahshua sits, upon his throne in the house of David. That's in Luke 1:32. Okay, now, it says, see chapter 5 of Revelation, verse 11. For the great judge fixes the prices of the cereal. So the great judge, well, who's the great judge? Yahshua. He has now come, when he sits upon the throne, he sits as a king and a judge. He's left off his mediatorial priestly attire to work as a high priest of sanctuary, and that's over with. Now he's sitting upon the great his throne, and he's the great judge now fixes the prices of the cereal because he has come to harvest the barley and the wheat. Personally, the Son. And you'll find out that's in Revelation chapter 14, 10 on through 20, where he harvests both the barley and the wheat. Okay? Now it says, for there must be something of the great importance in these symbols, for the Yahshua is with the speaker. For the Weymouth translation, that's the dictionary, is with the following reading. For a whole day's wage is for a loaf of the bread, also the whole day's wage for the 3 barley cakes. For the Weymouth translation is by the penny as a day's wage. For we believe that the words of the Yahshua is with the justification of this fact. For the kingdom of the heavens is like unto a man that is a householder that went out early in the morning for the hiring of the laborers into his vineyard, Isaiah 5:7. And when he had agreed with the laborers for a penny a day, he sent them into his vineyard. Matthew 20, verse 1 and 2. For the penny is with the fixing of the day's wage by the householder of the vineyard, which is Yahshua is the householder. Now, this is very interesting because that early morning when he went out to fix the day's wage with the first labor was with Moses and the children of Israel here at the coming up of the sun. Okay, first hour, early morning. Okay. Moses prepared himself in this last hour of the night, 12th hour. See right here. Okay. Now, so now it says for the kingdom, no, for the barley. is with the 1/3 of the price of the wheat, for the one goes into the field and is with the gathering only one measure of the wheat, and receives a full day's pay. Okay. So, barley is 1/3 the price of the wheat. In other words, 3 measures of barley is worth 1 penny. 1 measure of wheat is worth 1 penny. Okay, so it says, for the one goes into the field is with the gathering only 1 measure of the wheat, and receives a full day's pay, as the other one with the working all the day for the gathering of the 3 measures of the barley. Okay. Okay, now, see, it says, the one that goes into the vineyard and gathers the wheat, though, he don't work all day. He don't work all day. Okay. He only works the last hour of the day. 1 hour. That's the 12th hour, right here. So he only works a partial day. Whereas those that goes into the field to gather 3 measures, they work from sun up to sundown. They work the full 12 hours of the day, symbolic. Okay. But, well, actually, they only worked up through the 11 hours. Because those that works the first to the 11th hour, that's what they're hired for, to work in the heat of the day. The last hour of the day is the coolest time of the day. That's when the new laborers then take over to do the harvesting. So, and the new laborers go in and gather the wheat in the 12th hour, the last hour, 144th hour. Whereas it took 11 hours of labor to bring forth the barley. 3 measures for a penny. Alright, now this is a new disclosure on this parable. For the symbols had a very close connection with the parable given by the Yahshua. For hearing in is a truth for the requiring of the earnest attention. And he went out about the 3rd hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and said unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right I will give you. And they went their way. And again we went out about the 6th and the 9th hour and did likewise. And about the 11th hour went out and found others standing idle, and saith unto them, Why stand ye here all the day idle? And they say unto him, Because no man hath hired us. He said unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, Isaiah 5:7. And it says, And whatsoever is right, that shall you receive. Matthew 20, verse 3 to 7. All right, now. Actually, this is Matthew 20, verse 6 and 7. So now, he goes out the 1st hour, and guess what? He hires Israel to work for 11 hours, the very heat of the day, for only a penny to get 3 measures of barley. And remember, barley is the symbol that represents the wave sheaf offering at the Passover. And the wheat represents the 2 loaves of bread that are fully baken by Pentecost. And that represents the 2 houses of Israel and the 12 tribes of Israel. All right, now. So he said that he went out about the 3rd hour. Okay, here's your 3rd hour right here. See this cross right here? Pointing right at number 4? That's the end of your 3rd hour. Okay. So now, Yahshua comes along, he's a householder. And he went out about the 3rd hour. And he hires laborers When you say about the third hour, it means the end of the third hour. So Yahshua went out between the beginning of 3 and the ending of 3. Somewhere in between here, he went out and hired the disciples to labor in the vineyard. Alright, so now, then he said he went out about the 6th and 9th hour and did likewise. Okay, so now he said, then he went over here about the 6th hour, which ended right here. So right here at the ending of the 6th hour, to start the 7th hour, 1833, he went and hired the first day Adventists, the Philadelphians of Millerites, of the 6th candlestick, the sixth one, and he hires them to work in the 7th hour, the 8th hour, and the 9th hour. 9th hour ending here at 1844. Okay. So that's your 6th hour labor. That's the 20 verse 5. And then he went out, he said at the 9th hour he went out, right here at the closing of the 9th hour in 1844. He hired L.G. White and the little Adventist band at the top of to go to work at the top of the 10th hour. He hired them at the evening of the 9th hour. They go to work in the morning and at the beginning of the 10th hour. So the Adventists work collectively, 3 groups of them. Your 3 groups was your Seventh-day Adventists, your Shepherd Rod Davidians, Seventh-day Adventists, and your Branch Davidians, Kermit, Texas, Brother Johnson. That was the one that I was part of. So, the Adventist has a name starting all the way with 1833 with the First Day Adventists. William Miller, First Day, and 9th hour is 7th day. Your Davidian Seventh-day Adventist is also 7th day. Your Branch Davidian Seventh-day Adventist here at the 11th hour is also 7th day, plus the feast days. All right, now this is the only difference here. The last daughter, Gilead Senator Kermit, Texas, Gilead's Brother Johnson to him. He adds a new dimension to the sanctuary system because he's the one restoring it, completed. He adds all the feast days and the sacred name. And he adds the health reform to it. Renews Ellen G. White's teachings on it. And the forgiveness article, Matthew 18. And the restoration of the day. The sacred hour of the day, which is at your 9th hour. It's the 3rd hour of the day. The 3rd hour in the morning is your 3rd hour of the morning. That's when Yahshua is on the cross at the 3rd hour. And the 9th hour. That's the time you do your sacred hours of the day daily. 3rd hour and the 9th hour. So now it says, he goes out about the 11th hour. Well, yeah, he did. He went out about the 11th hour. The 11th hour began. And the laborers that he hired in 1970 coming out of Shepherd Rod and closing out the 10th hour, right here in 1970, he hired 2 main men as laborers. He had number 1, the head, the oldest one, Brother Johnson, Antiqual Esau, and he hired me at the same time, right after he hired Esau. He hired Esau first, and then he hired me within that same year that he hired Esau. So I come a few months later and joined Antiqual Esau at the beginning of the 11th hour, 1970. He didn't say in the parable of Matthew 20 that he went out about the 12th hour. He said he went out about the 11th hour. Well, the 11th hour began in 1970, and I was hired then. But there's not another call for laborers to work in the 12th hour, and yet we have a 12th hour remaining. It just so happens that part of the laborers that hired to work in the vineyard in the 11th hour ended up getting the renewal of their passport to work in the 12th hour. In other words, they'd done so well in the 11th hour, working in the desert, that they got their full pay of penny a day for working in that 11th hour from 1972 to 1993. And those that got their penny a day pay went into the next hour parabolic, and that's the 12th hour. But it just so happened when we had judgment down at December 2002 that there's only 3 of us that came to the judgment to enter into the 12th hour. Yet we were hard and worked in the 11th hour with the 11th hour people. So, the call that we were called in 1970 was the last call ever. But it shows right here, part of these labors that's called in 1970 is going to have to be a judgment. You didn't have no judgment at the end of the 10th hour, in the 9th hour, the 6th hour, you didn't have no judgment there. You didn't have no judgment at the end of the 3rd hour. You didn't have no judgment at the end of the 1st hour. As far as judging them for eternal life and working and wrapping up the earth's history in the 12th hour with the harvest. Because there was not to be no harvest until you get to the 12th hour. So the early morning laborers could just work and do an honest day's work to get their penny a day, and when they died and went to the graves, they come forward here in this 12th hour of the resurrection. They're resurrected here in this 12th hour. They faithfully worked over here, went into the graves, and waited for the resurrection at the end of the world. To get their penny a day, they had to resurrect in order to get their penny a day. They just got credit for the penny a day when they went in their grave. But they had to come out of their graves to actually receive the penny, that's the eternal life. So now, when you go read Ezekiel 37 about the valley of dry bones and that resurrection, and Ezekiel was told that this is the whole house of Israel, the whole 12 tribes. So Ezekiel was excited about that. He said, now, for the householder in the parable is with a reference for the Yahshua son, for the parable is for the revealing of the kingdom of the heaven. Let's see that again. For the revealing of the everlasting kingdom of the heaven here on earth, which is visibly set up by the antitypical Elijah David. Notice I said Elijah, Eliyahu, Malachi 4:5. That's a camouflaged name, folks. John the Baptist was recognized by that camouflaged name Elijah only by Yahshua. Did you know when John the Baptist started his preaching, only Yahshua knew that he was the antitypical Elijah? His disciples didn't know it. Yahshua kept it from them. The Pharisees, Sadducees didn't know it. Only Yahshua knew who the Elijah was. Same thing today. Only Yahshua knows who the antitypical Elijah is. Nobody in the Davidic world knows. If they say it's Victory Harder, which most of the Davidic world today holds to that, they say they're waiting for antitypical Elijah to come out of his grave and lead them into the kingdom. Well, it ain't going to happen. Because Yahshua is the only one that knows when antitypical Elijah comes. And because he's the one that's sent him. And Elijah knows who he is because he knows that Yahshua sent him to do his works. Only one that is the real Elijah knows who he is. All the rest of them think that they are, but remember that there's no man here on earth who will recognize him. That's the reason why B.T. Hardy said, when this Elijah comes in the last days, he said nobody will accept him. They won't believe it. Not one person. That's true. That's the reason why they became fearful in that parable of Luke 19, where it says they sent a message after him. After Yahshua resurrected went back to heaven, they sent a message after him and said, we'll not have this man to rule over us as he placed over us. Okay? So, The reason why they don't want that man to rule over them because they're fearful. They don't know him. They're looking for a mythical somebody to come out of the clouds and appear on earth, a full-grown man, saying, I'm the Elijah sent from heaven. Yeah, they'll accept him then. But they won't accept one that has grown up from his birth. Let's continue now. For the household in the parable is with the reference for the Yahshua, the Son. For the parable is for the revealing of the kingdom of the heavens. So now, the parable started here with Moses 3,500 years ago at Mount Sinai, coming out of Egypt. Moses started this parable with 5 groups of laborers. He had to get down to the last group of laborers. We call it the 11th hour. And in 1970, before the kingdom of heaven is revealed. When it shows up finally, the kingdom of heaven showed up in the 11th hour, parabolic hour. Okay, now what does that mean? It means that they had to work in the vineyard for 11 full hours from 1500 BC, 3,500 years ago, up to 2002, coming right down here to the 12th parabolic hour. I notice that shorthand of the clock is on the 12, the long hand is on the 1. And when you see that, that means that's the last hour of the day. And as soon as that hand goes around one more time, the shorthand will then be on 1, and the long hand will be on 1. So when you see the shorthand on 12 and the long hand on 1, you know that you've got 1 more hour of daylight left. So that means the 12th hour begin right here, 1 hour before sundown. This is where the kingdom of heaven shows up. That's who we are. The kingdom of heaven began to emerge here at the end of the 11th hour in 2002 at Carter, Texas. Folks, we're in for a treat because where we're at now, we have entered into eternity. Those are those that follow on day by day and do an honest day's work now in the vineyard. Whatever you were called to work in the vineyard, do an honest day's work, you'll get your penny a day, every day, until Yahshua shows up from heaven to put his seal on you. And so as soon as that happens, then you know that you're sealed for eternity. Right now you're sealed day by day, as you faithfully work day by day. That's your calling, and then you are assured of eternal life. Okay, so now it says that for the vineyard is with the representation as the field, being in the field. In other words, in the world. Okay. Now remember that the marketplace is the house that the farmer lives in. But the field is what he goes out to in the morning to start his work for the day, is out in the field. That's his vineyard. But the marketplace is his house. The marketplace is the barn. Okay? The barn is a symbol of the church, headquarters. Okay? Now, it says, for the vineyard is the representation as the field, and your fields of harvest are all over the world, and those sent for the laboring in the vineyard are the congregation of Israel. Well, the parable cannot refer to the one literal day of the 12 hours and to the time that the Yahweh makes the 5 calls, the first for the labor of the vineyard. But there is no record where the Yahshua is with the raising of the 5 Israel organization in the one day. with them all operating at the same time. So he hired the first one to start the first hour. But there's 12 hours in the parabolic workday. But there's 5 groups of laborers called at 5 different intervals to work in this 12-hour workday. 11th hour workday, which makes it up to the 12th hour. Okay. Now, so those of us that are now in the 12th hour, these 11 hours have already come and gone. They're behind us now. We're right here now. We can only go forward. So what we do now, we must do it as when we're called to do it. And if we procrastinate, there's no more call then to come back and pick up your work. Whereas here in the first 11 hours, the children of Israel will be called time again, to go work in the vineyard every day. They could and then they could quit and go and do something else. They can repent and come back and say, I don't want to go back and work in the vineyard. And they can be put back to work in the vineyard. But not here in the 12th hour, because you're harvesting now in the vineyard. We're in the harvest now. And the harvesters only show up one time. And once they start their harvest, they don't stop until they harvest every last grain, and then they go on their way. And they don't ever come back until the next year. But in this case, there's not going to be no next year. Once the harvest is started here in 2002, then the foundation to bring forth the foundation of the kingdom of David here on earth, to bring forth 144,000. Once that's been set into motion, there is no going back. The harvester stayed on the job until the 12th hour is over. So they've harvested all of those that had cleared back to Adam. It has to be resurrected. Folks, we're in the grandest time of Earth's history. Okay, for the parable cannot refer to the one literal day of the 12 parabolic hours, and had that. Okay, now it says, for the 5 calls in the parable must extend over a period of the world's history. In connection with the Israel's congregation, and for the period that the Yahshua is with the allegorically comparing as a 12-hour day, for he is with the hind of the laborers on the 5 different occasions. Okay. For the location of the time for each one of these calls, or with the referring and fully comprehending of the lesson and time that we are living in, for the proving that the parable is with the reference for the wheat, the barley, each for a penny. Okay. So now it says, note, for the householder is with the barley only with the first ones. Okay, for the hind into his vineyard, and of the going for their work in the morning, first hour. Moses, children of Israel. Okay, for the householder is with the hind of the 5 separate groups of the laborers at the 5 different intervals. Okay, 1500 BC, Moses, children of Israel. 27 AD, Yahshua goes out at the 3rd hour and hires the disciples to work in his vineyard. Okay, the disciples are hired at the 3rd hour, but you know the 3rd hour ended here at the cross, and the disciples had just begun their work. So the disciples then went to work in the 4th parabolic hour, this side of the cross. All the calls for workers in each segment of time, how they were called in, prepared them to work in the succeeding hour. Once that hour that they were called in is over, then they go to work, and they're prepared to work in the next parabolic hour. That's where it's been. William Miller was prepared in the 6th parabolic hour. He took up his work for real as a leader of the 7th, 8th, and 9th hours. Ellen G. White was hard in the 9th hour. On the 9th hour, still ongoing because she joined the Millerites during the 9th hour, 1840. She got her preparation, for 4 years. And then she was qualified then to take up her work in the 10th hour. So she was hired for 9th hour. Alright? So the Adventists worked in the 10th hour until the 11th hour. I worked in the 10th hour with the Adventists. I was born in the 10th hour. And I worked in the 10th hour, and then when the 10th hour was over, I was qualified and ready to go to work at the beginning of the 11th hour. I was already qualified. So, I received my official call to work at the beginning of the 11th hour. And so when the 11th hour was over here at number 12 in 2002, term attention, I had my training and I was qualified then to take up the leadership of the 12th hour. I was the younger of the two spiritual twin brothers, Esau and Jacob. I played the role of Jacob during that 33 years from 1970 to 2002, and I got my training under Antipa Esau of Brother W. Johnson. And so when his time was up, he just inherited his birthright in 2002, and it was given to me. Because I was the one that had the knowledge and experience and training to know what to do with that message that Brother Johnson taught for 33 years. All the truth and light that unfolded to Brother W. Johnson that he published and taught for 33 years, I learned it. I took my stock in trade during that 33 years of learning what was all unfolded in the 11th hour. And because I had the knowledge now and the experience and so forth, because I had gone out into the field, the vineyard, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and I worked that whole 33 years sharing everything I learned under Brother Johnson in the 11th hour at Gilead Center, sharing everything I learned with any Adventist that wanted to sit down and hear it. And I shared it with thousands of Adventists for 33 years. Okay, so now what is that going to do? Those that took a hold and understood what I taught them for 33 years as Adventists, one day when it comes time for the 144,000 to come forth out of the Adventist Church, you might find some of those people that I studied with all those years, remembering what I had taught them. And that would be the only thing to qualify them then to come on in and accept new life. Because if they paid attention to what was being coming out of the 11th parabolic hour at Gilead Center, you had to have an emissary going out there in the field that's carrying the truth that's coming from the pen of inspiration here at Brother Johnson is coming to teach, it's coming from the headquarters. You had to have somebody learning and training, a teacher, that could go out and then contact those that had ears to hear and then teach them the new truth that you've learned. I give hundreds of Bible studies, thousands of Bible studies that 33 years I was Brother Johnson. To Adventists, exclusively Adventists. Because I traveled with the Johnsons over the whole United States, practically when I was on the western part. I made several round trips with them to the camp meetings and went to all the different places. Yeah, well, I went north too. I went up to Michigan. I went all the way to Maine, matter of fact. Yeah, I did go east and west, north and south here in the United States. And all the way to Maine to witness to the Adventists at their special meetings they have in Maine. Okay. So, now, this is what I'm talking about. Well-traveled, well-qualified, I had gained the knowledge that I needed to gain, and those that didn't gain this knowledge that's coming out during the 11th parabolic hour, in Turner, Texas, they were lost whenever the time was over for that period, and Gilead Center 2002, that's the reason why only 3 of us escaped, and that was Alan DeLong, myself, and my wife. But we had studied for ourselves, show ourselves approved with everything that's unfolded at Gilead Center. We took it and we researched it deeper and deeper, make sure that we got all we could get out of those messages. So that was putting the extra oil in our extra vessels to carry us on into the 12th hour. Now we've got enough light to start us in the 12th hour. And now a new light is unfolding here in the 12th hour. So we're feeding off that new light day by day now. That's unfolding in the 12th hour. The oil that we got out of the 11th hour for 33 years relit our lamps that was about to go out there at the end of the 11th hour. And we took that extra oil and we put it in our lamp vessel, and we trimmed our wicks and we put a new light to it. And now that's the light we've been using to come into the 12th hour and to do the work that the 12th hour calls for. It's a whole new, opening up a vast amount of truth, and yet we've just touched the tip of the iceberg. There's truth vast and profound that are waiting to be opened at the appointed time, like the seven thunders. There's found in Revelation 10, and so forth. Alright, enough said on that. Let us get back now. It says, for the householders with behind the 5 separate groups of the laborers at the 5 different intervals. 1500 BC, first group. 27 AD, the second group, which come at the 3rd hour. 1810 years later, the 3rd group, which came at the 6th hour, the Millerites. 10 years later, the 4th group emerged right here at the beginning of 10th hour, 1844. The 6th hour group worked between 7 and 10. And now the 9th hour group, the Adventists are going to work between 10 and 12. They only get 2 hours of work. But, and that's true, because now I was hired to work in the 11th hour, and now I get to work in the 12th hour, so I get to work 2 hours. Literally hands-on working for 2 hours in the vineyard. So, anyway, it says for the 4th interval being next to the 5th, and last call at the 11th hour is with the 2 literal intervals, or the 2-hour intervals. For the 4th interval is with the culminating at the end of the 11th prophetic hour, 2002, 2003, Matthew 20 verse 6. And for the beginning of the 12th prophetic hour, Matthew 20 verse 6. Okay. With the beginning at the end of the solemn assembly, Matthew, September 28, 2002. Okay, now it says, and to the close of the probation, let's read that again. And for the 12th prophetic hour, or the 12th parabolic hour, with the beginning at the end of the solemn assembly, September 28, 2002, until the close of the probation at the end of the 12th hour. It is with the getting of the last hour of the daylight, beginning at the modern time 5 p.m. By the 1 hour before the sunset, parabolic time at the going down of the sun, modern time 6 p.m. Ancient time clock. For the better understanding of the ancient time clock is with a brief explanation. For the more comprehensive understanding is with the calling of the reader's attention to the viewing of the chart. We got this 12-hour chart on our book here, but it's not revised like this one is. See, I told you I'll put all the numbers back one notch, making 12 hours began here with the 1 and ending with the 1 on this side of the clock. Starting with the 1 on this side of the clock, ending at the 1 on this side of the clock gives you another 12 hours. There's 24 hours in a literal day. Alright. So it says, for the better understanding of the ancient time clock is with a brief explanation. For the more comprehensive study is with the calling of the reader's attention for the viewing of the chart. And we've already did this chart. You pretty much probably know it by heart by now. Okay, so it's in the days of Yahshua and even now, in some countries it's with the regulation of a time by the sunset at the 12 o'clock. Near the equator, with the days and nights being continually equal, is with the setting of the sun at the 12 p.m. and rising at 12 a.m. Okay. So 12 p.m. means that the shorthand and the longhand is lined up on the number 1. And that's your 12 p.m. Okay? Therefore, the 6 o'clock would be the noon hour and the daylight. Yeah. And when you have the noon hour straight overhead, and you got number 7 right there. That takes that slot. That's the end of the 6th hour. You have to wait till the 6th full hour to be complete before you can have mid-noon day. Therefore, the 6 o'clock would be at noon in the light part, according to the chart, and at 6 o'clock in the dark part. Would be the midnight, for this is with the time that the Yahshua used in the parable. So naturally, you'd have midday, 6 hours, and the daylight, midday, 6 hours of the night, midnight. In other words, you're in the middle part of the day and middle part of the night. But you don't call the mid part of the night the 12th hour, you call it the 6th hour. Just like you call the midday. This is the 6th hour of the day. You don't call it 12, which we have on our clock all day at 12 straight up. You should have 6 in the place of it, in place of 12. Instead of having a 12-hour clock on your wall, you should have a 24-hour clock stripping at you. You have the number put in the proper place, then you have 1 to 1, 1 to 1. Okay. Therefore, the 6 o'clock would be at the, okay. For the first through the 5th call, right? Okay, let's just put that from the first to the through the 5th call. Number 1, first call at the early morning. Well, we've been through that. Number 2, second call at the 3rd hour. Early morning right here, 3rd hour right here. Number 3, 3rd call at the 6th hour right here, midday. William Miller, 1833. Okay. 4th call at the 9th hour, L.E.U. White, 1844 right here, where it says number 10. 5th call, 2 hours later at the 11th hour, Matthew 20, verse 6. To Elijah David, 2002, is at the 5 p.m. modern time. 1 hour or by the beginning of the 12th hour before the sun sets, 2002. But the previous explanation of the Revelation 6:6, a measure of the wheat for a penny and 3 measures of the barley for a penny, we shall endeavor for the proving that the symbols point back into the parable of the household and Yahshua allegorically looking forward into John's vision. For the explanation perfectly fits to the parable and vision in the harmony with the Elohim book and law, and as a present truth lesson is for the learning and for the accepting of the truth. Morning call. We done been through all that. So it says, we'll review it again. Morning call. We just like a few minutes left here. It says, for the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is an householder, which went out early in the morning, labors into his vineyard, and when he had agreed with the labors for a penny a day, he sent them into his vineyard. Okay. Well, the Yahshua could have no reference unto any other people other than Israel after flesh, for they are the ones with whom the Elohim is with the bargaining and sending into his vineyard for the first 11 hours. Okay? The 11 parabolic hours. So they only go in and work, plant, and grow stuff, but they don't work in the 12th hour. Why? Because harvest time hadn't come yet. You have to wait for the harvest time to really come before you go work in the harvest. So, for their labor is with the consisting of the representation of the Creator, or householder, and for the giving of the rights of the Holy Scriptures, for the psalmist is with the making of the following record of the agreement. So now, it says, what happens then when you go to work in the 12th hour? You start with the first hour of the morning, don't you? Don't you have to work 12 hours when you're in the harvest time? Okay. So you have 12 hours in that one symbolic 12th hour. You start the harvesters have to start early in the morning in order to get the field harvested by sundown. Alright. For their labor is with the consisting of the representative of the Creator. Where it says, for the Yahweh could have no reference on any other people other than the Israelites of flesh, for they are the ones with whom the Elohim is with the bargain and sending into his vineyard. Okay. For their labor is with the consisting of the representative of the Creator, or householder, for the giving of the Holy Scriptures, or for the giving of the Scriptures. For the psalmist is with the making of the following record of the agreement. He has remembered his covenant forever. The word which he commanded unto 1,000 generations, which covenant he made with Abraham and his oath unto the Isaac, and with the confirming of the same unto the Jacob for a law, and unto the Israel for an everlasting covenant. Psalm 105, verse 8 to 10. Alright. For the covenant is with the making of the promise with Abraham, and his seed is with the obtaining of the promise. For he has remembered, for his oath unto Isaac is with the Elohim solemnly declaring that he will be with the fulfillment of his agreement. For the Isaac, even as his father obtained not the promise, is with the Yahweh Elohim confirming of the same unto the Jacob for the administrating setting, or with the establishment of the covenant. With the establishing of the covenant to Abraham is with the realization by the Jacob as a law, and with the Israel receiving of the promise for an everlasting covenant, for the departure of the Israelites going out of Egypt, or with the first for the going forth, laboring in the vineyard, come out of the bondage of sin, right out of Egypt, and go right into laboring in Yahshua and Yahweh's vineyard. This brings the purpose status our contact us at the 11th hour call, and that's number 11. Click on an audio archive to hear this message. And we're going to close now with a song entitled Whiter Than Snow. Yahshua, how long to be perfectly whole? I want thee forever to ransom my soul. Break down every idol, cast out every foe. Now wash me and I shall be whiter than snow. Whiter than snow. Yes, whiter than snow. Now wash me and I shall be whiter than snow. Yahshua, for this I most humbly entreat. I wait, blessed Yah, at thy crucified feet. Thy face for my cleansing, I see thy blood flow. Now wash me and I shall be whiter than snow. Whiter than snow, yes, whiter than snow. Now wash me and I shall be whiter than snow. Yahshua, thou knowest I patiently wait. Now and within me a new heart create. as whiter than snow. Wash me and heart